So this is going to cover some of the basic rules for drawing Lewis structures. We're not going to go through any examples. We're just going to talk about how to draw them and what's involved, how to get the atoms situated in the correct order. And there are really only a couple of simple rules to follow when it comes to the Lewis structures for most molecules. There will be some exceptions, and we'll get to those. But for the most part, there are only two things you need to worry about. And one is, whatever molecule you have has to have the correct number of electrons in it. That is, when you add up the valence electrons for all of the atoms in the molecule, those are the valence electrons you have to have in the Lewis structure. So you have to use the right number of electrons. And the other thing that you have to make sure of is that all of the atoms in that molecule obey the octet rule. That is, they will have access to 8 electrons. As I said, there will be some exceptions when we'll get to them, but for the most part, atoms in molecules have access to 8 valence electrons. The notable exception here is hydrogen, which only needs 2 valence electrons because of its small size. So for most Lewis structures, those are the two things you need to check. Do you have the right number of valence electrons, and do the atoms obey the octet rule? And there might be more than one correct Lewis structure. If there is, fine, that's no big deal, and we'll talk about those molecules when they come up. So, right number of valence electrons, atoms obey the octet rule, and there may be more than one correct Lewis structure. So, how do you get the atoms connected? How do you know what order to put them in when you're looking at the molecular formula for a molecule? One thing to always keep in mind is that hydrogen will always be an exterior atom. It can only form one bond, so it can't be in the middle of a molecule attached to 6 other things. It's an exterior atom, it will only form one bond, and that's a consequence of it only needing 2 valence electrons. If you look at most molecular formulas, the atom that's written first will be the interior atom, and all of the other atoms are connected to it. For example, in CO2, the atoms are connected such that the C, the atom written first, is in the middle, and it's connected to the 2 oxygens. So we're not even worried about bonding yet. We're just worried about getting the arrangement of the atoms correct. For some molecules, the way the atoms are written in the formula indicates the way they are connected. So if you have a molecule like methanol, its molecular formula can be written out as H3COH, and it's written that way to convey the idea that the 3 hydrogens are connected to the carbon, and then the carbon is connected to the oxygen, and the oxygen to the hydrogen. So if it seems like the structure is written out in a way to give you a sense of how the atoms are connected, use the formula for that too. And then finally, for some molecules, if you have multiple atoms in a formula, they will usually be exterior atoms, and they'll surround a single central atom, and probably the most obvious example of this is H2O. The atoms that are written first, the hydrogens, are exterior atoms, and the oxygen is in the middle. And this goes also with the first rule that says hydrogen has to be an exterior atom. So if you keep those things in mind, those are the things you want to keep in mind when you start to draw Lewis structures.